Music camera.
The Embassy of India, Copenhagen, has been celebrating the 150th birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi with great enthusiasm and gusto. Over the last year, we have organized a series of activities. We started off last year by organizing a projection of a short film of Gandhiji on one of the iconic buildings in Copenhagen. Thereafter, a well-known Danish singer, Anita Bershe, sang Gandhiji's version of Vaishnav Jantu, and this became very popular in a medley song which was put together in India. One of the highlights of the 150th anniversary celebration has been an outreach to high schools and universities, where I have gone and spoken to about 30 high schools and a few universities about Gandhiji, his life and philosophy. I must say that the students have been very impressed and extremely interested in Gandhiji, because sustainable development and frugality is very important in Scandinavia. We have also planted trees in honor of Gandhiji on the occasion. Some of the other events organized by the embassy include vegetarian food festivals, a cycling event called Cycling for Peace, and we have today invited a number of young students from various schools in Copenhagen for a painting workshop. So we look forward tomorrow to the Gandhi Katha being organized, and I hope a lot of people in India and Denmark will listen to it.
Thank you, Ambassador H.E. Shri Ajit Gupte ji, for your kind message and support. Namaskar and welcome to the Gandhi Katha, the story of Mahatma Gandhi, narrated by me during the commemoration of the 150th birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi, which incidentally is also the 150th birth anniversary of Kasturba Gandhi, his wife. Kasturba Gandhi's sacrifice, suffering, and contribution into making Mohan into the Mahatma and inspiring thousands of women to fight for justice and against racial discrimination and in the Indian freedom struggle is extraordinary. I express gratitude to the Embassy of India, Copenhagen in Denmark, for hosting the Gandhi Katha amidst these challenging times to learn from Gandhiji's philosophy of truth, non-violence, and purity of means, his spirituality, his environmental credo, his practices of health and wellness of body, mind, and spirit, for coping up and staying safe physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually during and after the coronavirus COVID 19 pandemic, which has affected the entire humanity. On October 2nd, the world celebrates the UN International Day of Nonviolence. And in India, we celebrate Mahatma Gandhi's birth anniversary as Gandhi Jayanti. The entire world is remembering Mahatma Gandhi, the apostle of peace and non-violence. We have an opportunity to remind the humanity of the efficacy of the messages of Mahatma Gandhi, the father of our nation. I pay my respects to the leading lights of Denmark and convey my warm wishes to the Danes and the Indian community who have joined me online today. Mahatma Gandhi's name finds resonance across the continents and continues to inspire countless people through his teachings of nonviolence. Mr. Modena Lyckertoft, former minister and Speaker of Parliament, wrote in the Gandhi Anthology in 2019, and I quote: Gandhi is one of history's greatest moral leaders and a decisive force for ending colonial rule in India. Let his humble life be an inspiration in our collective effort for a sustainable future, where humanity lives in harmony with nature and within the capacity of our small globe. Until 1921, Mahatma Gandhi and the Indian non-violent struggle for freedom in South Africa and in India was unknown in Scandinavia. In Denmark, however, Gandhiji received some early publicity because of a few liberal Danish missionaries who admired him, especially Reverend John Edward Bitterman, Anne Marie Peterson, and Esther Fairy. To the Danish missionaries, Gandhiji had explained in the article in Young India on September 8, 1920, titled The Inverts of Non Cooperation. He said, and I quote: "The movement for non cooperation is neither anti Christian, nor anti English, nor anti European. It is a struggle between religion and irreligion, powers of light and powers of darkness." Anne Mary Peterson met Gandhiji in 1917, then in 1930 and in 1945 in India, and wrote, and I quote: Gandhi is one of the strangest and best men of India, and sided himself with his poor. He became their leader in the struggle. Gandhi is everybody's servant and everybody's master. The first article about Gandhiji appeared in Danish newspapers on August 25, 1921, which said there is a revolt against the English in India. The revolt is led by Gandhi. The readers learnt. Through Gandhi, concluded Esther Menon in her biography of Gandhi in Danish, published in 1930, and I quote: God has shown us the first right of suffering and the glory of service. Gandhi Katha is based on the ancient Indian oral tradition of Katha or storytelling with hymns and narration. I have given talks on Gandhi Katha in 98 countries during the commemoration of the 150th birth anniversary of Gandhiji in the past 2 years. In all the countries, people have great reverence and respect for Mahatma Gandhi. Many have been inspired by him to take up the cudgels against injustice through nonviolence. Others have followed his environmental credo and frugality, and still others have been deeply touched by his simple spiritual life. The humanism of the world's thought leaders are so deeply reflected in Mahatma Gandhi's teachings. The new generation is eager to understand more about this greatest man of the last century who made such a huge impact on humanity and inspired many world leaders. Gandhiji used to begin and end his day with prayers. These were prayers from all the religions of the world, Sarva Dharma Prarthana. Gandhiji's internal core comprised of the essence of all the religions, one that he had acquired from long study and reflection, the devotional poetry of the saint poets that he had heard, sung, and absorbed since childhood made up a significant part of the life of his soul. He said that ultimately all the religions point to the same truth of compassion, love, forgiveness, and tolerance, and that everyone must study the essence of all the religions in an attitude of perfect reverence and have friendship and respect for the practitioners of different religions and diverse cultures. All of Gandhiji's friends were from different religions and cultural background from around the world, and he actively encouraged friendship across religions. One of the legacies that Gandhiji has given to humanity is nonviolent conflict resolution through interfaith dialogues for establishing unity, harmony, and brotherhood. Even after 7 decades have passed on since Gandhiji left this world, in every part of the world, his relevance is felt as strongly as ever before, and his visions and actions are of an enduring significance for all times and places. His approach to life was holistic and cannot be divided into watertight compartments of social, religious, political, public, or personal life. Gandhiji stands out as the champion not only of political democracy but also of economic and spiritual democracy. I will play a Gandhi Katha dhun which underlines his thoughts, and it is in Hindi. Gandhiji believed that moral degeneration is the root cause of all evils, including conflicts. This explains his lifelong crusade of attainment of moral values such as truthfulness, non-violence, purity of means, love, respect, self control, forgiveness, friendliness, compassion, mercy, and so on. For Gandhiji, the principle of satyagraha or nonviolent resistance in civil disobedience was by non cooperation with evil through the moral values of love force, truth force, and soul force through self sacrifice and suffering. For him, the consideration for the sufferings of fellow human beings was of paramount importance. His belief and actions that social change for establishing justice and dignity of humans is both less harmful and more sustainable when achieved by non-violence is true eternally. His legacy of satyagraha is widely recognized the world over and is seen in many movements for civil rights nowadays. Mahatma Gandhi's environmental practices were based on conservation of natural resources, which were often misused and overused for the sake of development. Gandhiji had warned about the unsustainability on the global scale and had said that greed will be the main reason for the environmental degradation and the ecological crisis. And this he had said almost a century ago. Gandhiji was the first environmentalist, much before the world was preoccupied by concerns of ecology and environment. And with his stunning premonition and knowledge, he had declared that earth has enough for man's needs, but not for man's greed. He had also said that the earth, the air, the land, and the water are not an inheritance from our forefathers, but on loan from our children. So we have to hand it over to them as it was handed over to us. Equality for women within the society was a principle Gandhiji passionately believed in. His vision of Sarvodaya, the welfare of all, becomes very relevant in the crisis of internally displaced people and migrants. It may well have been done keeping in mind the very basic unit of human organization, a village or a county. His vision of Gram Swaraj, which is a self reliant, independent, self governed village built on the premises of sustainable growth, is the need of the hour. According to my understanding, Mahatma Gandhi's life was an epic of faith and endeavor. His faith was in truth, the ultimate reality of truth, and he endeavored to attain it through non-violence throughout his life, till the very last breath. Gandhiji's adherence to truth, non-violence, and purity of means has inspired to give Gandhi Katha with hymns and narration so that people can put their hearts into understanding Gandhiji, get inspired to learn from his extraordinary ethical and moral leadership, his simple spiritual life, revolutionary thoughts, actions, his lifelong service to humanity against all forms of injustice, and how he continues to inspire people in all the parts of the globe at all times and in all ages. Perhaps the greatest source of strength for Mahatma Gandhi was in his faith in God. Truth was the deepest and the most complete form of God. The faith gave him the constant awareness that he was to be nothing but an instrument in his hands. He was to go wherever he was led. For him, the guidance of God constituted two things. One, he had to walk on the path enlightened by truth that was available to him in whatever measures and form. Two, he had to constantly gaze inwards and find inspiration through self introspection, self examination, and self purification by repeated questioning. And that question was Ko Aham, who am I? What am I? And what is the real purpose of my life? This question has been asked in our ancient Indian civilization since the past 5,000 years. The answer came to Gandhiji that the real purpose of life was to serve others. In the ashram prayers in the morning and evening, every day, the first verse from the Ishopanishad, the shortest Upanishad from India, used to be recited. And it says, Isha Vasya Midam Sarvam Yat Kincha Jagatyan Jagat Tena Tyaktena Bhunjitha Ma Gridha Kasya Svidhanam. That everything in this universe belongs to God. Nothing really belongs to us. Enjoy the objects of the world in an attitude of perfect non attachment. Enjoy it with a feeling of sacrifice to the extent that is necessary for you, and leave the rest for others in the society. Never ever crave the possession of others. So, renounce and rejoice, he says, signifies eternally the significance of Indian civilization. So let's listen in to the Gandhi Katha Dhun, Na Yah Tera, Na Yah Mera.
Na yah tera, na yah mera, na yah tera, na yah mera, Ishwar ka yah raaj hai, Ishwar ka yah raaj hai, Ishwar ka jal, Ishwar ka phal, Ishwar ka jal, Ishwar ka phal, Ishwar ka hi raaj hai, Ishwar ka hi raaj hai, na yah tera, na yah mera, na yah tera, na yah mera, Ishwar ka yah raaj hai, Ishwar ka yah raaj hai, Ishwar ka jal, Ishwar ka phal, Ishwar ka jal, Ishwar ka phal, Ishwar ka hi raaj hai, Ishwar ka hi raaj hai.
The deeper the faith, the greater was the endeavor for Mahatma Gandhi. He said truth is God, Satya hi Parmeshwar hai. Faith in truth led Mahatma Gandhi to two other realizations. If God is omnipresent, then truth is omnipresent too. If each human being were an aspect of God, then each person is capable of being truthful, of being good and doing good to others. The second realization was that in spite of all the upheavals in the history of humankind, humanity will only progress in an auspicious direction because truth, that is God, is only interested in the welfare of its creation. His endeavor throughout his life was devoted to the search of that element of truth, to awaken it and to nurture it. This is why he could feel oneness with everyone. For most of us, this realization does not set in easily. But because of this understanding of oneness, Gandhiji had no enemies. He did not want to settle any scores with anyone, and he did not want to take any revenge. He merely wanted to extend his love, compassion and respect to everyone, and that was one of his main traits. He respected individuals as individuals without attaching labels, and that is another trait that we see in him. And he remained ever positive in spite of all the upheavals, in spite of all the challenges and crises that he met in his life. He remained positive, calm, and retained his balance of mind. Romeo Rolla, the famous French writer and pacifist who won the Nobel Prize for Literature, wrote the biography of Mahatma Gandhi in 1924, and that brought him to the notice of the world. And when in 1931 Gandhiji went to meet him on his way back from the second roundtable conference in London, he went to Switzerland and spent 5 days in Villeneuve with Romeo Rolla. Both of them discussed the crisis of civilization. And then he wrote, and I quote, "This little man is so fragile in appearance, is tireless, and fatigue is a word that does not exist in his vocabulary. He could calmly answer for hours without a muscle of face twitching. His mind proceeds through successive experiments into action, and he follows a straight line, but he never stops." So we can see that we uh, is the greatest apostle of peace the world has seen in the recent past. His notion of peace is focused on tolerance, forgiveness, compassion, oneness, truth force, love force, and soul force through self suffering and sacrifice to melt the hardest of the hearts of the adversaries. Albert Einstein, the greatest scientist of the first half of the 20th century, had called Mahatma Gandhi as the supreme practical leader for change and said, and I quote, "I believe that Gandhi's views were the most enlightened of all the political men in our time. We should strive to do things in his spirit, not to use violence in fighting for our cause, but by non participation in anything you believe is evil." Gandhiji was the conscience keeper of humanity. That his ideas will be an inspiration to us both as individuals and as a society is beyond any doubt. He was an epoch maker, one who could sow the seeds for the next generation from the fruits of the previous one. Mahatma Gandhi is the most powerful visionary and a practical idealist from the first half of the last century, whose life is a role model for all of us. But the effort has to begin from a point where you are standing, and that is what made all Mahatma Gandhi's idealist actions practical, and he can be truly called a man of action. But it does not only mean that he was very busy. What we mean is the action of putting ideas or beliefs into practice more than anything else, was the driving force in his life. The answer for Mahatma Gandhi was always found in action. He had said, "An ounce of practice is worth more than tons of preaching." But if you want to understand Gandhiji, you will have to understand him not only with the intellect, but also from the emotional part of you and from acts from his life. Usually, people see him from different perspectives. For some, people think that he is mostly a politician. But at the same time, some would think of him as a saint. And there are others who will think of Gandhiji as a nation builder. He may be all these. But I think when we consider Gandhiji, we have to try to find out what is the common stream, and this is what we need to know in his different aspects of life that we see in his personality. One was the commitment to value, and the second one was efficiency in the kind of work he did. This is part of his comprehensiveness, and there was a unique blend of, for example, enthusiasm on one hand and patience on the other. Mahatma Gandhi has made significant and seminal contributions that span across such disciplines as economics, environment, spirituality, conflict resolution, international peace, civil rights, education, society, politics, and much, much more. At that time, the most harmful and destructive impact on the world was that of imperialism, violence, war, materialism, and the greed for controlling the world. Mahatma Gandhi advised to shun these seven social sins in his speech on October 22nd, 1925. Politics without principle, wealth without work, commerce without ethics, knowledge without character, pleasure without conscience, science without morality, worship without sacrifice. In my opinion, Mahatma Gandhi's life left the most powerful and strong imprint on the humanity of the world. He had said, "My life is my message." John Haynes Holmes was a pacifist, anti war activist, and the founder of American Civil Liberties Union. He had met Gandhiji in London in 1931 and then in Delhi in 1947. He found Mahatma Gandhi's presence, those bright eyes shining through his spectacles, his voice so clear and yet so gentle, his whole presence so simple and yet so strong. He said, and I quote, "I believe that he is unquestionably the greatest man living in the world today. When I think of Gandhi, I think of Jesus Christ." I will play the Gandhi Katha dhun or hymn in Hindi about his philosophy of truth, non-violence, and purity of means that combine together in the form of satyagraha.
लागी रे लगन लागी रे लगन सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन लागी रे लगन लागी रे लगन सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन अहिंसा से सत्याग्रह सीखा सत्य अहिंसा से सत्याग्रह सीखा सर्व प्रकार के भय का मोचन सर्व प्रकार के भय का मोचन सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन लागी लगन लागी लगन सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन।
Mahatma Gandhi spent his initial formative years till 18 years of age in India, and that's where the seeds of spirituality was sown. The 3 years that he spent in London as a student of law enabled him to interact with reformers and thinkers of that time and read the works of the great philosophers and poets of the West. That broadened his vision. And that is the time when his interest in religion also started taking place. He became a barrister in London and also learned citizenship. He spent 20 years in South Africa, where, as a political organizer and social activist, he implemented his novel legacy to the world called Satyagraha. In 1904, in South Africa, after reading John Ruskin's book Unto This Last, Barrister Mohandas Gandhi transformed his life overnight and started leading a community life of self control, voluntary poverty, bread labor, and Sarvodaya welfare of all. He established 4 ashrams in his lifetime two in South Africa called Phoenix Settlement and Tolstoy Farm, and two ashrams in India called the Sabarmati Ashram and Sevagram Ashram, where Kasturba Gandhi and Mahatma Gandhi lived in poverty like the common villagers of India along with the ashram community. These were his ideals of non-violent face-to-face society for the welfare of all and carrying out constructive programs, which is his second gift to humanity. As I had said, the first gift is Satyagraha. Gandhiji's ashrams had a mingling of political and spiritual aims. It was a practical laboratory for transforming ordinary men and women into extraordinary seekers and satyagrahis for offering the highest sacrifice in the freedom struggle on one hand, and to get involved in constructive programs to serve the poorest of the poor to establish their self respect and dignity. I am happy to inform you that I was born in his last ashram in Sevagram. My father was inspired by Gandhiji since his childhood and joined the non-violent freedom struggle in India and lived in the Sevagram ashram. The life and thoughts of Mahatma Gandhi are intertwined and inseparable. His politics was imbued with his spiritual experiments, and his spirituality was tempered by his vision of a non-violent society, and his constructive program was integral to his politics. The unique practices of Mahatma Gandhi, his control of palate, his fasts, his spinning, his silence, and his prayer, gave him the internal strength, and they were as much a part of his politics as of his spiritual life. These practices and experiments were sustained and nurtured by the inmates of the ashram community that he had founded. The ashram community, through its own practices, affirmed, modified, and validated Mahatma Gandhi's ideals and practices and continued to do so even till today. This shows the relevance of his practices. Gandhiji carried out his experiments in health and wellness in the ashrams through nature cure, diet control, fasting, hydrotherapy, sunbath, mud packs, and observing silence for one whole day. Our friend and the British Quaker, Sir Horace Alexander, spent considerable time in two of the ashrams in India, and he noticed that in the daytime the ashram bell used to ring 56 times. He said, and I quote, Gandhiji had wonderful courtesy and punctuality. I was to learn quickly that he was the slave of watch. He had more to do in every 24 hours than almost any other man. So he had learned how to pack the most into every minute. Yet he never gave the impression of being hurried and impatient. So he comes across as the role model for punctuality, promptness, and discipline. Gandhiji has given three gifts to humanity. The first one is Satyagraha, the second one is constructive programs, and the third one is Ekadasha Vrata or the 11 observances, which were a set of rules for the ashram inmates for spiritual progress and voluntary self-control. The principle behind these observances were to do unto others as you want others to do unto you. Ivan Illich, the Croatian-Austrian philosopher, had come to Sevagram ashram in 1980 and stayed for a week. Every day he would sit in Bapu Kuti or Gandhiji's cottage, which was a very simple structure made up of thatched roof, bamboo and mud, which was locally available, and he lived in frugality. And after sitting for a long time, Ivan Illich said, and I quote, this hut of Mahatma Gandhi demonstrates to the world how the dignity of the common man can be brought up. It is also a symbol of happiness which we can derive from practicing the principles of simplicity, service, and truthfulness. I will play the Gandhi Katha Dhun now, which explains Gandhiji's philosophy of Satya hi Parameshwar hai, truth is God.
आँखें पवित्र राख सत्य ही तू बोल, आँखें पवित्र राख सत्य ही तू बोल, ईश्वर साक्षात होंगे अंतर टटोल, ईश्वर साक्षात होंगे अंतर टटोल, सत्य ही है परमेश्वर बापू का बोल, सत्य ही है परमेश्वर बापू का बोल, उसी परमेश्वर की नित्य कर तू शोध, उसी परमेश्वर की नित्य कर तू शोध। आंखें पवित्र राख सत्य ही तू बोल, आंखें पवित्र राख सत्य ही तू बोल। ईश्वर साक्षात होंगे अंतर टटोल, ईश्वर साक्षात होंगे अंतर टटोल, ईश्वर साक्षात होंगे अंतर टटोल।
Though Gandhiji's role and contributions to the political arena are well known, what is less known is his contribution towards health and wellness. Gandhiji was a firm believer in the principle that a healthy mind keeps the body healthy, and he stressed the importance of a healthy lifestyle and positive thinking. His interest in health, hygiene, nutrition, and diseases was as great as his interest in politics. He insisted that adopting preventive measures for diseases was better than treatment. He also said that it was important to focus on cleanliness, a controlled diet, and an exercise regimen, that it was best to avoid overconsumption of medicines, especially those that were not required. He was also a firm believer and practitioner of nature cure and conducted experiments related to diet and fasting since a very early age. He always believed that it was important to understand what caused diseases and then remove that very cause, rather than falling ill again and again and then attempting to treat it with excessive medication. Gandhiji was essentially a man of science. He approached problems in a scientific manner. Mahatma Gandhi's message to the world on the vital question of health and well being is very important. To him, the study of this question was part of the service to God and His creation, which was his mission. Knowing to care summed up his life. His message was simple and easy to follow. It encouraged everyone to respect simplicity, voluntary self control, frugality, reduce the want, minimalism, follow the tradition, cultural practices, values, the environmental credo, and treat oneself through nature cure for living in harmony with nature. For Gandhiji, the outside universe was but a reflection of the inside universe. He repeated time and again that the universe is compressed in the atom. There is not one law for the atom and another for the universe. It was based on his actual spiritual experience that gave him the conviction that the moral principles have no meaning unless they can be made to serve as the guide of conduct in the daily affairs of man. The Sanskrit proverb Yatha Pinde Tatha Brahmande says, "You are the universe within the universe. As with the self, so is the universe. What is going on within you is same as what is going on in the universe." From the mind body perspective, Gandhiji's standpoint was that health is an optimal integration of body, mind, spirit, soul, and environment. Environment is our extended body. There is a nice Vedic expression from the ancient Indian wisdom tradition of India which says, "As is the atom, so is the universe. As is the microcosm, so is the microcosm. As is the universal body, so is the cosmic body. As is the universal mind, so is the cosmic mind." Dr. Sherwood Eddy was a leading American Protestant missionary, a prolific writer, and an educator who visited Mahatma Gandhi in the Sabarmati ashram in 1929 and wrote that Gandhiji's bodily presence is like that of Apostle Paul or Socrates. He wrote, and I quote, "He impressed us as the most childlike, the most transparent, the most lovable of man. His whole character is centered in his unique passion in truth and reality." Very few people know that as a couple, Gandhiji and Kasturba Gandhi contributed immensely 123 years ago to public health emergency, treating patients as frontline workers selflessly in the service of humanity in South Africa and in India. Gandhiji and Kasturba Gandhi returned to India in 1915. There was an outbreak of Spanish influenza pandemic in 1918, Gandhiji opened up his Sabarmati ashram as a quarantine center, treated and served patients through nature cure, provided simple vegetarian diet to boost immunity, and maintained physical distancing. Gandhiji and Kasturba Gandhi took care of the families of the patients, looked after their physical, mental, and spiritual needs, gave them correct information, helped them in being positive through prayer, meditation, and recitation, and taking care of each other during the time of the Spanish flu pandemic. Gandhiji had said on 10th November 1918, our ancestors could build such tough bodies in the past, but today we are reduced to a state of miserable weakness and are easily infected by noxious germs moving about in the air. There is one and only one really effective way by which we can save ourselves from them even in our present broken state of health. That way is the way of self restraint or of imposing a limit on our acts and wants. In 1942, Gandhiji wrote the book called Key to Health, in which he wrote that anyone who observes the rules of health mentioned in this book will find that he has got in it a real key to unlock the gates leading him to health. He will not need to knock at the doors of doctors or Vaidyas or the traditional health practitioners from day to day. And this book became very famous as it was translated in many European languages. Today, the world is facing three kinds of crisis globally. First is the COVID 19 pandemic. The second is the serious and long drawn financial crisis. And the third one is the ecological crisis, which is impacting everyone. We have to look for answer somewhere within ourselves by learning from the life of Mahatma Gandhi, which is so open, so transparent, so truthful, and it is available for everyone. The lesson the pandemic is teaching us is simple. When one member of the family falls sick, the entire family is affected, and soon the community is affected, the nation is affected, and then other communities in other nations in this globalized world. The well being of one individual has an impact on people on the other side of the globe. This is true of every action of ours. What we eat, what we buy, what we think, and what we do has reverberations and repercussions on all life on earth. It is this anubandha, this interconnectedness that sustains all life on earth. We are all in this together as one human family, as brothers and sisters. And whether we choose to see it or not, we only have one home, this planet Earth, our Mother Earth. Our ancient sages and seers have always looked upon us as Vishwamanava, global citizen, and said that the world is one family, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. The current COVID 19 pandemic is a wake up call for every country, big or small, rich or poor, developed or developing. It has opened our eyes to the fragility of the existence of humans. We'll all have to learn to live with COVID 19 now and in the future as well. Instead of reinventing a new lifestyle, we just have to get inspired from the life of Mahatma Gandhi to make the necessary changes in thought, action, and conduct for coping up physically, mentally, and spiritually. And this is the future that the coronavirus pandemic is pointing out to us if we observe carefully. If still we return to the normal standard of finding happiness by chasing after money, power, position, lifelong consumerism, then COVID 19 has given us the wake up call. This kind of life of empty consumerism and mass distractions has only increased the difference between the rich and the poor, created the huge carbon footprint, increased the misery of the invisible poor masses. When a crisis makes you feel stressed, meditation, prayer, and recitation relieve the stress response. Fear and anxiety are forms of stress that become exaggerated when events become uncertain, when you feel a loss of control over the situation. And when the stress keeps repeating itself without let up, the thinking mind reacts to all of these conditions. It always has, even in normal times. But a crisis brings stress into high relief, making it very capable of lowering the immune system of our body and causing inflammatory diseases. Decades ago, stress was classified as epidemic of modern life. The Gandhian way of life is the best guide to practicing the coping mechanism that induces fearlessness, relaxation, calmness, inner peace, absence of anxiety, and remaining positive. Therefore, Gandhiji comes across as the greatest healer and the wellness guru who comes free of cost. Gandhian principles of freedom from fear and care for all is a perfect prescription in the times of this crisis. Gandhiji's emphasis on healthy lifestyle, positive thinking, empowerment for self care, and care in the community would make perfect sense. I once again take this opportunity to thank the Indian Mission for hosting the Gandhi Katha. My special thanks are to all of you who have joined me online today. I will end with the peace benediction in Sanskrit for the universal welfare. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah, Sarve Santu Niramayaha, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschit Dukkha Bhag Bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Let all be happy. Let all be healthy. Let all experience auspiciousness. Let no one be overwhelmed by grief. Om Peace, Peace, Peace. With Gandhiji's blessing, who had said that peace is the only positive force which will lead us from darkness towards light, I will end the Gandhi Katha with this hymn in Hindi, Shubha Mangal Ho. May there be auspicious good, may there be good, may the earth be auspicious, may the sky be auspicious, may every particle on earth be auspicious.
मङ्गल